Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is our weekly EV portion of our podcasts. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome, everybody.
Picture behind us here is a new studio with an automotive theme based in Tesla, and that's what it rendered for us. And this was Grok that did this for us. The other one from DAL-E was a bit wider aspect ratio, but I've noticed that AI is beginning to do a better job rendering at least images than it did last week and the last few months.
So, thinking about that, we know that your phone listens to you, whether you're using it or not, or we believe that.
We believe that,
I'm
yeah.
going to go all conspiracy theory here. So, if the phone is listening to you, you talk to somebody about something, and then the next thing you know, that's what comes up in your Facebook feed. Do you think that AI has been listening to you and has been trying to improve based on the criticisms you've been giving it?
Oh, undoubtedly, and I'm actually seeding it doing that very thing. So yeah, we hope that that is the case. So we've got a number of things to cover today with you. Again, if you're chiming in, we'd love to hear from you. If you have opinions you want to express, we are wide open to any viewpoints, and let us know where you're coming in from. That's always fun. What part
Absolutely,
of the world,
definitely.
Yeah. So one of the first things that I found is in the news over the last week is the Tesla Robotaxi. And there are some analysts out there, one of them being very pro Tesla, which is Dan Ives with Wedbush. And he shared his expectations for this Tesla game-changing autonomous tech unveiling, the Robotaxi event, 1010. He says, and I quote, "We believe Tesla is the most undervalued AI name in the market, and we expect Musk and Company to unveil some game-changing autonomous technology next week in LA. We continue to believe that AI and full self-driving represents a $1 trillion valuation alone for Tesla over the next coming years." This was a post on X. Interesting. It's going to be just in a week or so, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the expectations are pretty high for this. Elon was promoting it. I saw a post from Elon on X. The expectations are pretty high. We will definitely be reporting on this, see what it ends up being. If it ends up being as significant as they're saying it's going to be, you never know. We might do a break-in podcast even on that day.
Yeah. And of course, it's very few things coming out of Tesla have had this much hype surrounding it, I've noticed. There was, of course, the delayed reaction, which
Yep.
was this thing was supposed to be out in September. And then it got moved to October. And Elon has been teasing everyone about this Robotaxi Day event, claiming that it will be one for the history books. And yeah, so they're hyper focused at this point on achieving this release.
If AI really did end up being a $1 trillion valuation to add to Tesla, that means that the stock is maybe valued at about a third of what it should be valued at.
Really? Okay.
Because Tesla as an overall company right now is a little bit south of $1 trillion in value, in market cap value. This would be just the AI portion. You could say that the majority of Tesla's valuation right now is not its AI products. It's its battery, stationary power products, and its automobiles.
Right. And there's so much secrecy surrounding this. Usually things get leaked ahead of time, especially when there's a delay like this. But no one really knows what we're going to see October 10th so far. Nothing has really been, shot on the roads and test vehicles or anything like that. So we're all in suspense, I guess, at this point.
Definitely. I think the Robotaxi is, but based on what I'm reading, it's going to be smaller. It's going to have kind of a Cybertruck-like a look and feel, and is likely to not have a steering wheel and other type of implements that would be necessary for a driver to drive it.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing as well. And of course, that is a game changer because anything that you propel down the road for a century or more has had a steering wheel, brakes, and a gas pedal.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens 1010. Looks like we've got EV's Smoke ATX from Instagram chiming in. Thanks for joining us. He says, Austin, Texas, always tapping in with you all. EV love. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you guys keep safe. I've seen a lot of weather coming up through the Gulf this last couple of weeks.
Yeah. We've got a few images to pop up here, Jesse. If we can go with the first one, which is a 786 prefix, the Tesla Diner, which everyone is anxiously waiting for, which is potentially going to revolutionize the pit stops that we make in order to recharge or get fuel or gasoline. And of course, it's right on the forefront of technology, and Tesla is involved. The picture that we're seeing here, you guys know more of the artifacts in here.
Oh yes, I assume that you're talking about everything from milliways to the USFWS car, um, all the even the meteor shower
and
coming across the sky.
and the level 4 chargers.
Those were all references to the Galaxy Hitchhiker, uh, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm sorry about that.
There you go.
But more real-time news is, yeah, these are going to be level 4 chargers going in, some of the latest and greatest of Tesla's chargers.
Yeah. 2 stories, 2 viewing screens. You can't quite see them in this rendering. Let's go to Diner Dash 1 and we can see some of the actual construction. There we go. We've got what looks to be a really cool building with a fascia on it that you normally don't see on commercial buildings. And it looks like the grading is taking place here. We got a scissor lift, we've got a ladder, we've got some concrete columns being poured. Those may be the charging columns. There we go. And then Diner Dash 2, there's another view of it. And Diner Dash 3, a little glimpse of the interior. And you don't get much of this because I think it's pretty restricted out there.
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of what happens to get these pictures are people are flying drones over and into the work area when workers are not there because it's all blocked off with fence and is obstructed from view. It's fascinating stuff. Wonder how many drones they've caught.
Yeah. Physical address on this, by the way, 7001 Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. Construction began a year ago, late last September. And the initial restaurant building had gone up by early November. Many of the ideas for the Tesla Diner, they say, came from Elon Musk in 2018, where he was recounting on Twitter, primarily including the concept of an old school drive-in, roller skates, and rock restaurant. So that's the theme we're after here, apparently. He also talked about the idea of having a menu pop up in Tesla vehicles as soon as they start charging, effectively streamlining the process of ordering food.
That's going to be cool.
Yeah. The site will have 2 drive-in movie theater screens, the frames which are now being built, on which the patrons will be able to watch clips from the best movies in history while charging their vehicles and eating. Construction crews initially built the frame for the first movie screen in March of this year. The second frame was built the end of July after some power lines that had been blocking construction finally came down.
Now, do you think if they're able to coordinate via plug-in with the charger a menu to come up on the car, that they would also take the time to coordinate the sound going with the screens to go into the car via the fact that the car is connected to a charger?
Seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Yeah.
It sure does.
Because the software, the Wi-Fi connections, all of that would easily facilitate that.
Yeah, and the MCU controls all the sound system, and these Teslas have great sound systems.
They do indeed, yes. My God, it's like the old drive-ins. Do you remember we used to have the cast aluminum
Oh
speakers
yeah.
that you clipped onto your rear window with a little volume control, and if you were either too drunk by the time you left or something was distracting you, you sometimes drove away with that speaker in your window. You didn't break the window, you
If
ended
you
up with a
didn't break the
speaker.
window,
Yeah.
yes.
But yeah, this looks like a replay of that. Well played, Elon Musk. This should be fun. Instagram EV Smoke ATX says, no, sir, no leaks here with this one, 1010. All right. Got another article here that crept up during this last week, and this one is actually from Ford, Jim Farley.
Yeah. I really liked reading through this article, and it makes a whole ton of sense. You know, Jim Farley and Ford, if you remember, we talked a little bit this summer about Jim Farley has taken an EV trip across the country. And one of the first things that was reported was Jim Farley began to understand the charging issues that people were having because he sometimes had a hard time finding the infrastructure to keep his car charged. He also had European trips, a couple of them where much the same thing had happened. Now he's saying, he talked to customers during this trip. He found out what some of their pain points were. And one of the biggest is infrastructure, is charging, but not what the industry has been talking about. It's the basic of the basic. If you buy a car, you want to have the chance to charge your car at home. And people can't afford to dump a couple $1,000s into hiring an electrician, getting the hardware, and getting it installed.
Hmm?
So Ford has now said, for the fourth quarter at least, they'll take care of the cost. You buy a Ford electric vehicle, Ford will take care of making sure that you both have an appropriate charger for that Ford vehicle and that that charger is appropriately installed with all the electrical done.
You know what's so fun about this time period that we live in? The CEOs or the business leaders of these car companies are actually able to make decisions like this. I mean, Elon does it all the time.
Yeah.
And here we've got Jim Farley coming out and making a command decision about taking some excuses away for the potential buyers of their vehicles.
You know, that's one of the things I like about this. Um, People always will come up with excuses.
Mhm.
And all he did was say, oh, there's a problem. Let's solve it. It's an easy solution. Now, you were mentioning it might not be quite as easy as Jim Farley is thinking, though.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a picture of it here, Jesse. If you want to throw up the Ford Charger, um, of course, it has Ford written on it, and it's a cool looking little charger. But some of the issues related to giving away free charging. Um, the, um, the electrical installation costs have an enormous amount of variables when you're installing something like this. But before we go there, you and I both do home charging. And I think
Hmm.
one of the biggest advantages that I found once I began to drive EVs is you literally do not go to a gas station anymore. I don't think I've been to one. Maybe 6 months ago when I was driving one of our fleet vehicles and I needed to get gas or diesel or whatever it was. But you never go to a gas station anymore. And every morning when you get up, you have a full tank of gas, or
Yeah.
in this case, electrons
Yeah.
that will take you wherever you want to go because it charges in the middle of the night. And that's another distinct advantage. You can lower your costs. You can't change the price of gasoline at the pump, but you can change the price of electricity depending when you charge.
Right.
You get off peak demand hours and the cost comes down a percent, quite a few percentages. So again, getting back to this novel offer from Ford, there are going to be some challenges, and they are related to: is your electrical panel large enough to handle an additional 50 or 80 amp breaker? Well, in a lot of cases, that's not the case. You mentioned homes built in the 80s here in Phoenix, some of which had only 100 amp service.
Yeah, a lot of the homes that are built in start going all the way up to the early 80s, and most homes built in the 70s or before, unless they have been retrofitted with additional service into the house, typically are running 100 amps at 208 volts, and that's it.
Yeah. And of course, these cars aren't going to be happy with 10 amps or even 20 or 30 if you're doing any high rate charging. We're
Exactly.
talking upwards of 80 amp breakers. Now, changing a panel out is a whole different expense than just simply adding a circuit breaker and running some conduit to an outlet somewhere. But does the charger panel, the connection to the charger, need to go underground? Are there obstructions in the way? Is there trenching involved? That's why I always get a chuckle out of these people that get on social media and say, can somebody recommend a low cost electrician that will quote me? Well,
Yeah.
first of all, no electrician in their right mind is going to quote you over the phone because of all of these variables that homeowners are unaware of. What it's going to take to get that run done from the panel to that outlet.
Well, just the basic idea. Here in Phoenix, we have ranch style houses were very popular up through the mid 80s.
Hmm.
Okay, so if your ranch style house that has a garage at one end, if the panel's at one end, piece of cake.
Right.
You punch a little hole through the wall and put your charger in. You might only have a 2 or 3 foot run. But if the panel's on the opposite side of the house, now you're talking, what, 80 feet?
Or even 120 or 150 feet, depending on where it's running.
Because it's not just you're not going to just run a wire right through the house. That wire has to either go up, down, or around,
Mhm.
and that adds significant footage, plus the length of the house, which is going to be probably 50 or 60 feet. Yeah, it can be a real challenge.
And then you have things like architectural details. Maybe the homeowner doesn't want exposed conduit running across the front of their house, so they want to go underground. Well, now you've got trenching equipment that has to come out,
Right.
and a whole different expense. So, although I'm very pleased that Ford is making this very generous offer, the implementation just has a number of questions, attached to it.
S Fraley on 77 on Instagram. That's a great comment for this too, though. On the pro side, not having to get gas has saved our marriage, he said. I'd always leave the car empty.
Yeah, I had an ex-wife that used to put in $2 or $3, and I would point out to her, you're going to the gas station, using fuel continuously, keeping it at a quarter tank. Why not just fill it up? It would actually save money. Well, anyway, that's why she's not.
Yes, exactly.
Facebook, Din Tan says, "Hi, sir. Thanks for joining us." Instagram, Todd L33. He says, "Is there an option to fix the Tesla Model 3 battery to restore it back to 320-mile range?" The simple answer is no. As you get degradation in a multi-cell lithium-ion battery system, it's a degradation across all 7,000 or so cells.
Right.
And there's a little bit in each cell, which is then what cumulatively reduces your range. In the old days, when we fixed televisions, even old color televisions, there was a little box you could buy that would actually fire some high voltage inside the CRT tube to blow off some of the accumulated debris inside the CRT tube.
Okay.
It was short term, but in that case, you could actually improve your TV temporarily, and a lot of people bought these. But there's nothing like that in the EV battery world that will allow you to give it a turbocharge.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed from my experience on charging vehicles is that if you vary the type of charge that you're giving the car, sometimes you give it normally maybe you're giving it a 208-volt charge. If you take every once in a while and go ahead and charge it up to 90% on a supercharger, or alternatively, plug it into a 110 outlet that has a dedicated circuit every once in a while, that slow trickle charge. Sometimes those things can help condition the batteries and help to balance out and allow the battery pack to level out its load. The vehicle that I've had for a couple of years, it's a Model S, a 2017. When I first got it, it had if it went to 100%, it had about 305 miles of range. And if it went to its normal, I would normally charge it to 90%, it was about 275. By doing those kinds of things, varying the type of charging that I do on it, I've had it up to 313 miles of range, and right now I could charge it. It would go to 311, and my normal typical charge is 200 and about 279 or 280 miles. Every once in a while, I'll give it a full charge, even though it's the older style lithium-ion battery pack. I have found that it tends to help the car be able to balance things out to sometimes go all the way to the top.
Really? Okay. All right.
So
Great advice. Thank you, Mark.
you bet.
Yeah. Um, so another thing that we didn't mention about the Robotaxi unveiling is they claim that with this focus on autonomy during this unveiling, Tesla is also expected to do a demonstration of its latest Optimus humanoid robots. And I don't know if you guys,
Right.
yeah, I mean, you guys watch social media. I mean, every week you're seeing major improvements in these humanoid robots. Ability to pick up an egg. Not
Mhm.
only pick it up now, but to peel it. I saw one of those a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, its capabilities continue to become much, much more like a human,
Mhm.
entity.
Pete,
So, yeah.
did you see the one? I'll send it to you. Maybe we can pull it up next week. There's a video of a robot doing surgery on a grape, on the skin of a grape.
No,
And
I
it's
haven't seen that.
extremely like small little incisions and cuts and stuff. So
Very thin membrane, very sensitive. And I mean, we're all, I don't think anybody is not anticipating that the whole world of medicine is going to move toward machines and robotics because humans have limited senses.
Right.
We have limited tactile sensations. And some of this type of work, like you mentioned, especially working in the brain, there's no margin for error. Working around the spinal cord, for example. And so anyway, I'm looking forward to it.
That's it's an exciting thought to think of. A lot of times uh, cancerous tumors are deemed inoperable because of where they're located, either in the brain or in the spinal cord. And with robotics to help and AI, those previously inoperable cancers might become operable.
Very much so. Yes, agreed. So here's an article from Fox 13 News in Tampa, Florida. We had a call actually from a Roadster customer yesterday in Tampa, Florida. And he said something like this. He says, do you guys have a soft top or a hard top and the enclosure that goes with the Roadster and the hard top? And I said, well, we don't have any for sale. What's wrong with yours? He said, well, as the storm surges began in Tampa, Florida, I, at the last minute, decided, you know what? I'm not going to leave my Roadster in the garage in case there's some flooding. And he said it was a brilliant decision because there was flooding, and I left my hardtop case and hardtop in the garage, and now it has saltwater damage.
Okay.
So there is definitely, some flooding issues. But the way this article reads was, as the water rose in Tampa during Hurricane Helene, fires also started to break out, and some of them started because of electric cars. And then they go on, of course. As the water rose, the what happens is the technology inside the battery packs, and we're talking about 400 volts DC.
Right.
Salt water, or any kind of water with any kind of mineral like salt in it, is somewhat conductive. It may be majorly conductive if it's seawater.
Right.
Well, it's a conductor, and you've got 400 volts, and you're trying to contain and channel that 400 volts into very specific parts of the car. When salt water gets involved, it just indiscriminately starts sending that into parts that aren't supposed to have 400 volts DC. And of course, then you get arcing and you get sparking and you get overheating lithium ion cells. And the next thing you know, you have them igniting, despite the fact that they're in water.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's kind of like throwing a magnesium block underwater. It makes its own oxygen, and you can watch that thing at the bottom of the lake just, boiling and burning,
Yes.
making its own oxygen. So, according to Mayor Jane Castor, she correctly surmises water and the ion batteries don't mix, and they literally explode. Well, I think in an extreme situation, yeah, it would seem like it was an explosion, but there was some arcing
Yeah.
taking place before then.
Yeah.
There might have been pressure building up, and then you might get a lid that blows off, which could, be construed as an explosion. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is salt water and lithium-ion batteries are not going to have a chemical process that creates an explosive, compound.
Yeah, lithium ion is not at all the same as sodium or, sodium, potassium, some of those other elements on the chart. It can be and will, like magnesium, it can and will create its own oxygen as it burns. But to say that it just explodes,
Yeah, that was the mayor's first pass rendition.
that's a little bit
that.
of a stretch.
So they were saying that you could hear horns honking in the distance as these cars were being flooded. The cars were shorting out,
Yeah.
was their prognosis. And there was another situation where there was a house that burned to the ground. Well, flooding doesn't cause a fire,
Right.
So this was, they surmised there was an EV parked in the garage. They didn't say what brand, thankfully. That would start a whole new,
Yeah.
inquisition, I guess. And but they feel that the house fire was gutted by morning, was most likely caused by that EV igniting.
That could be true. We know that EVs can catch fire if the electrical short occurs. That short causes a great buildup of heat. It could cause the battery to go into thermal runaway. So I get it.
Yeah. There's a bit more advice given from someone else in Tampa, one of the politicians, it looks like. And the statement was, if you have any equipment, scooters, bikes, electronic bikes, electrical vehicles that have been submerged in salt water, please do not power that on because you will have issues. Well, my take on that is you're going to have issues well before you try to turn it on.
Yeah. I think if it's not actively burning, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to attempt to power it on and nothing will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually went through this in 2017. Remember all of the Tesla Model S's, the flood damaged ones we bought
Yes.
with 2 hurricanes on the East Coast, Florida and Texas? Yeah, the cars that we received, it was quite an education figuring out what happened, for different types of flooding. The worst one was any kind of brackish water or salt water,
Yes.
where they were close to the coast, and now you've got electrolysis taking place. The wiring harnesses were completely shot. The electronics were completely toast. And there are a number of modules and subassemblies in an EV that have circuit boards in them. In the Tesla Model S, for example, underneath the back seat, which is one of the lowest points in the car,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a tub, you can have up to 2 40-amp chargers back there. And as those get any kind of water ingress, you then end up with damaged, subassemblies.
Yeah, and the copper, it will chemically react with the water. The copper just disappears over time, and then as it electrically reacts in the water.
So yeah, the turning on part being dangerous. Saltwater event will penetrate the circuitry and reestablish and reroute connections well before you get to turning it on.
Yep. On TikTok, Johnny5 has a comment about this too. He says there's an interesting video making the rounds of a Tesla bursting into flames left in the garage. They just couldn't drive it out of there.
Yeah, and we had one like that. In fact, it's the one that my wife drove for a while, the red 2013 Model S.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of the vehicle said that as the water began to rise in his garage, he became concerned at that point, obviously, because what's going to happen to the car? Well, by the time it reached 18 inches in the garage, he decided, you know what, let me just on a lark try to get the car out of there. I don't know if he had a plan as to where he was going to drive it, because that flooding was pretty rampant up and down
Right.
the street. But he attempted, and he said it was completely dead. He could not even open the locks or get in the car. And that was the car that the insurance company advised him, if you need to get the stuff out of the back seat. He was a manufacturer's rep. He needed a bunch of stuff from the back seat the
Okay.
following day.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, break the rear window and get your stuff out. So he had his neighbor come over because he loved his car. And it was very difficult for him to do any smashing on his car.
Sure.
So the neighbor comes over and he tries to smash in through the trunk lid glass, which is a fairly large piece of glass, not realizing there's a plastic membrane that runs through that doesn't allow you to get through it very easily. So after he broke that, he said, well, that didn't work. So let's try the little rear door wing. And there's, that little triangular
Yeah.
wing. He was able to successfully break that so he could reach in, but they didn't realize that there is no mechanical door lock on the rear doors in a Tesla Model S, the 2013s at least.
Mm-hmm.
The only one that you could do that with was the front window, the front door window. So he ended up breaking that. Now, picture us. This was on Copart. We had no idea when we were bidding on this car what kind of damage caused this. So, and the pictures are pretty poor at these auctions. So we
Right.
see 3 broken windows and we're looking for body damage. Did a tree fall on it? How did these 3 windows break? None of it made any sense. And we assumed incorrectly that there was body damage that was hidden in those poor pictures taken at Copart. Once we got the car, the mystery continued. We looked at it and said, there's no body damage. How did these 3 get broken? And that's when we hack into the MCU, the computer in the car.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to extract owner information and had this conversation, and he was then able to fill in the gaps as to how this car ended up in this state.
Well, and that's how we ended up with the car too, because we are not the only ones who thought that there has to be some sort of hidden body damage in this car.
Yes. Yep. So anyway, it looks like we're coming to the close of this EV podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us. In a half an hour at 11 o'clock, we're going to start the Tesla Roadster podcast. And this one is going to be focused on the emergency room effort that we often have to go through with Tesla Roadsters as they come in bricked or dead. And there are a lot of medical metaphors in our business, and you may see some of them being described in this podcast. So if you're interested in Roadsters or want to continue this type of discussion, join us in 29 minutes on the same channel.
Take care.